welcome to Real Talk with Miss Brenda. Yes, I'm Miss Brenda, and today I have a very special guest with me. All the people that we talked to have been from the Lovelady Center and have had some kind of issue, and God has used the center and the wonderful staff we have to help them find their purpose and get their lives back. And so this is one of my most special people. She actually had a lot, God used me a lot in her recovery, and I'm so excited about it. Hi, Carmen.
Hey, Miss Brenda.
It's always so good to see you.
You too.
I don't see her as much as I used to because, well, why don't I let you tell us, tell a little bit about what happened to you and how you got to the Lovelady Center.
Okay, sure. So my journey with addiction started in 2011. It started with prescription opiates. First Lortab, and then ultimately Dilaudid. I started having migraines really bad, and my primary care doctor, who I also knew was a family friend, treated me with Lortab at the time.
But weren't you a nurse?
I was, yes.
And you didn't know you shouldn't have? Well, go ahead.
So addiction wasn't taught that much in early, when I went to school for it at least. I hope it is now. So I found out the hard way, what it was like, what detox was like. My first detox was a couple of months in, and it was coming off of Dilaudid, and I thought I had the flu. I thought I was dying. So I'd actually called into work that week telling them I had the flu. But once I had breakthrough pain with my migraines, I would typically go to the ED, and so they would give me Dilaudid there. And then my primary care doctor started prescribing it for me, and before you knew it, I used it to go to sleep, I used it to get up, I used it to function in my day. It was a difficult time. I was married young, had a son very young, just before I graduated nursing school, and my husband at the time was actually in the midst of addiction, even though I did not know what that was. I would find him passed out on the front porch. Honestly, I would just go through the nursing things, check his blood sugar, do all of this. He actually had a massive car accident with our little one in the car. And it took me a long time before I realized where he was. And in realizing where he was, I realized where I was. But that didn't change anything. By that time, I was hooked on opiates.
I mean, you were really hooked.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, Dilaudid is kind of hard to get. But what would you do? You would just take a pill?
Mm-hmm. So initially, I would just take it by mouth. I did wind up diverting from the hospice company I was working for on a patient. I was supposed to discard their leftover meds, and then I actually brought it home. That's when the IV use started. And so at the time, I injected what was in total a 3,000 milligram bag of Dilaudid, parsed out over a month, almost every night, between my husband and I both.
Oh, my goodness.
Yes.
Of course, being nervous, Nellie, I would have been afraid I would have OD right there. Okay, so you're hooked on Dilaudid, opiates. I mean, full steam ahead. Now you're shooting them.
Yep.
Intravenously, and still working as a nurse.
Initially, so about that time, my employer, I think they had some concerns, and so
Imagine. I think I might have a few concerns too.
They sent me for a drug test, and so that was at the very end of my stint of having the flu. So nothing actually popped up, but they had enough concern.
You had ongoing flu.
Yes, it just never ended. Yes,
never ending flu unless you happen to have Dilaudid that day.
Yep. But at that point, they did let me go. And I never held a job in nursing after that. I got a couple of interviews, even made it to some orientations, but after that, I just never worked again, which spiraled me.
Did you lose your license?
Ultimately, I did. In 2013, the Board of Nursing actually came to St. Clair County Jail and revoked my license in person.
You were in jail.
Yes, I was in jail when they came. Mm-hmm.
Well, okay. So you got out of jail and you got clean?
Always for a little while, but never for long term. Yes.
Okay. So did you keep using Dilaudid or did you go to here?
No, I switched to heroin. Dilaudid became more expensive and lasted less and less. Heroin was cheaper and longer acting. So I moved on to heroin.
Moved on to heroin.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So were you trying to maintain, and you had your little boy, and you were still married?
I was. We were about end of 2011, early 2012. My husband went to jail for robbery in the first. And so after that, he was looking at 20 to life in prison.
So what you are telling me, you were a nurse, y'all had a good house,
Mm-hmm.
kid in daycare,
Mm-hmm.
everything looked like it was supposed to look. In other words, somebody could be living next door to me like that, and I never know.
You'd never know.
And so you just living a normal life, and you were absolutely bona fide just hooked on heroin.
Yes. Yes.
I cannot even, we're going to go on and we're going to listen, but I look and I know you intimately now, and I have a difficult time, even knowing all this is true. I still can't see it. So go on. Listen. And you were a daddy's girl.
I was. My parents divorced when I was in the 5th grade, and we moved back to Alabama, and were raised with my mom and my grandparents.
But this woman had raised with a silver spoon. She had money wasn't an issue in her family. She wasn't from the wrong side of the tracks.
Mm-mm.
Degree in nursing, a 4-year degree in nursing.
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
I did not have struggles like some others may have had. And I did not have an excuse that could be readily seen as to why I just don't think addiction discriminates. And that, like, I had no idea, even from a medical perspective, I had no idea the risks that were there. And I had no idea what I was into until I was so far in that I could not see the light of day. But after my husband went to prison, it wasn't long after that they arrested me and put me into Shelby County Jail for the first time. And during that time period, my grandfather also passed away. So my family took a pretty hard hit. It wasn't anything they expected, anything they'd ever dealt with as far as addiction goes. So they actually called my dad, who at the time was living in North Carolina, to see if he would come down and help with our son. And he did. And that is the last time that I physically saw him or had custody of him.
Last time you saw your son?
2011, early 2012.
And you were, in spite of this addiction, I know how much you loved your son.
Oh, yes.
And your daddy just took him away.
I like to say that it was probably at that point, I had lost my husband, I had lost my career, I had lost my son. My grandfather, who was the only father figure I had, was gone. And then at that point, I didn't have a relationship with God. So I didn't really have anything worth living for. But what I did have was something that I could go to that would ease the pain and that would keep me from thinking about how much I had destroyed my life. And heroin became my best friend.
Your best friend?
Yeah.
That's your bestie.
Yeah. Nearly killed me.
Yeah. Well, I know that your mother told me that a couple of times she thought you were dead.
Mm-hmm. I OD'd several times. One time she had the guy that I was with, he'd actually called the ambulance and everything, and either way, they walked away, but he essentially dropped me off and told my mom to come to the front yard and get me. The worst overdose was my final overdose in 2016, and that is, I thought that I was getting heroin. That's when fentanyl had just hit the market, and I actually injected fentanyl, and as awful as it sounds, I fell completely out, off the toilet, pants down, and was not breathing in Walker County. And the guy that I was with came and dropped me off on the porch of the, or the stoop of Walker County ED. And I'll never forget waking up to everything I had cut off of me, spread out across, them trying to revive me. It was the most sobering experience, it was awful. And I'll never forget, they actually woke me up, but I had enough with me that I was so scared that instead of telling them my name, I told them my sister's name, because I knew I had warrants for my arrest in several counties at the time.
That's not a way to get your family out of mourning for it.
No, I'm sure she wouldn't have appreciated that any. Yes.
So you got out of the hospital and got clean.
Almost. So that came after. So my overdose came after my stint in prison.
How long did you go to prison for?
For a year. So when
You were in prison for a year.
for 1 year.
And what was the charge?
Possession of a credit card and fraudulent use of a credit card and possession of a controlled substance. They sentenced me to a year and a day, stop and return.
So you had to do that to the door.
I had to do that to the door. And then they brought me out on SRP to the Lovelady Center, which is my third time coming in.
You had been in and out of the center before when you wanted to do, but you never were serious.
No, I felt like I could do a program with my eyes closed. Like I could do what was expected of me. I could walk through the process, but my heart never changed. My expectations of what I would have to do to pull myself out of the hole that I was in was just unrealistic. And so when I would go out and I would try for a little while, and when things didn't go my way, before you knew it, it was either a guy or just life circumstances, and I would turn back to heroin.
A lot of people, when they come into the center, many times I expect them to be like that because they feel like a woman will feel like she has the answers and she can do it and she doesn't need us telling her what to do. Where in reality, that's another lie.
Yep.
A lie that addiction will tell you. So, how'd you get there the last time?
The very last time. Granted, this is after SRP. This is after a year in prison. This is after the final overdose on fentanyl. My mom actually picked me up from the hospital after they had told her I was dead.
A big overdose?
Yes.
When she thought you were dead?
The family of the guy I was with had called her and told her that I was dead. I had been down for a good 20, 25 minutes before I got there. So, in all honesty, there was no reason I shouldn't be.
No, I don't know how you weren't dead.
It's only God at that point. No medical reason as to why you would be not breathing.
Everybody totally fed up. Your daddy not speaking, you're not seeing your son. Lost everything. Lost your license.
Lost it all.
Literally. I mean, you didn't have a thing.
Nope. But I did have a warrant for escaping the first hanging over my head. That I did, which is looking at 25 to life.
Is that when you somehow ended up in the Shelby County, and he sent you to a program, not us. He sent you to the
work release.
The work release.
Yes.
And you just walked away and went and got high.
I sure did. I'd gone to court and.
So you had an escape charge.
I did, escaping the first. They released me to walk literally across the street.
You got to remember, these people out there don't know anything. We got to tell them just some of this kind of stuff.
That's fair. Yes, they had released me to walk across the street and turn myself into work release, which is essentially prison on the street. Yeah, it's prison on the street.
You wouldn't go across the street.
I was still withdrawing. I was maybe 4 days out, and I left out of there and never turned back, and it didn't take them but a little while.
Did you have a car waiting on you?
No. So oddly enough, there was this guy who had also been released, and he was walking down the street. So I very carefully ran behind him or beside him, hoping that if anyone had a ride, it would be him. And it was. His mom came and picked both of us up.
What did he say? Oh, Mom, I got somebody else.
She seemed to just be riding along with the plan. Yep. And they dropped us off at my grandmother's house, where I quickly picked up my car. Luckily, that time it hadn't been impounded. And from there, I actually went back to his house, and he is also an addict.
Is that the one you ended up without?
No. That was a different one. Men were not positive in this scenarios. No, but he was instrumental in me getting my car, getting my first, set of drugs and out of withdrawal. And I was with him for probably about a week before I left and went back to the guy that which was my demise. I was with him for the final 3 years, and ultimately the one I was with when I overdosed on the fentanyl.
And that big love of your life, when you overdosed on fentanyl, he just threw you out at the door of a hospital, called your mother and said you were dead, and drove off in your car.
Yes, and wrecked it
Is
in
that
his
the right
front yard.
guy?
Yes, the right guy. Totaled it in his front yard.
And so your mother went to the hospital and got you.
She did.
And what did she do?
She dropped me off on the front steps of the Lovelady Center. Actually, the 3rd floor, but close enough. Up those steps. She was done that time. She wasn't going to pay for me to be anywhere anymore. She wasn't going to support me. She told me if I was going to do this, I was going to have to do it on my own. And she sat me on the 3rd floor. And I remember you and Melinda coming out, and she had washed her hands. She asked if y'all would take me back. And I remember y'all looking at me and saying, "Will you sit still this time?" At that point, I was broken. That's the least I could do, was sit still. And that time I did, not without help, without a little bit of motivation, but I went through restoration.
I tend to motivate.
Yes. That was a little bit of a motivator. I remember you looking at me in restoration. We had gone through, I was probably about a month in. One of the girls that you had been really close with, Pat, was up there. And
One of the girls, what?
That you were really close with, Pat.
Oh.
Yeah, was up there. And we had gone to your house, because you had all the women in your house at some point through restoration, doing a Bible study. And I'll never forget sitting in your living room, and everybody was going around the room and just talking about just the reality of where we were. Just the recidivism of, if you go back out again, how many times have you been back out? Have you already been to jail or prison? Like, what are your next steps? And I remember you had some tool, and the reality was that I had a less than 1% chance of surviving this, of not spending the rest of my life in prison, or not going out and overdosing for a final time, and that being the legacy that I left.
What it is every time someone goes out, they give it a shot, and they go out and they use again and again. Every time it lessens their chance of ever coming out of that deep, dark hole they're in. It takes a lot to climb out of that heroin, horrible black hole.
It was an eye-opener, though, because the reality was I was looking at an escape in the first charge that holds a 20 to life sentence. I was already a habitual offender who had been to prison, and I had just overdosed. So the reality was any move I made in those directions would lead to either spending the rest of my life in prison or dying. And I knew that those words were true, and I needed to hear them in those moments.
You actually were on the Shelby County paper as most wanted. Remember
yes, I
that? Most wanted.
I was. Shelby County's most wanted.
And they actually picked you up at the center again.
They did. They picked me up and took me back, and by the grace of God, it doesn't make sense, because if anybody knows anything about Shelby County, they are not lenient in any capacity. But through the works of the center, through a lot of, I know, your hard work, and others working alongside an attorney, they managed to release me into the custody of the Lovelady Center, which makes absolutely no sense at all. Given my history, they had no reason. I had given them nothing to trust me on at all. But so, in my opinion, that was nothing but God.
Oh, it was totally God.
Yeah.
Because it didn't look, with my natural eyes, when I looked at your case, I thought, well, she's gone. And it's coming back.
Same.
But
Same.
let's go on. This time, you stayed.
This time I stayed.
A lot of ups and downs.
A lot of ups and downs. I think the game changer for me was having you in my life to the extent that you were. Having me come to your home and humble myself, to have someone feed into me with daily Bible studies, to have someone feed into me with the reality of what life looks like and what a servant's heart looks like, and how to humble myself in a way to just simply say, I surrender, and use me as you will. Didn't matter if it was cleaning toilets or working the back dock of the thrift store, or what I had been was no more. And so at this point, I had somebody who was willing to pour into my life and tell me, number one, that I was worth it. Number two, that they loved me. And number three, that though my past was my past, it didn't define who I was. And having that just changed my world.
Well, what happened, we need to tell. What happened is that I watched Carmen from a distance very carefully, because there was something about her I felt that I saw, and there were some things that it was a spell at my home where I have had a lot of surgery on my hips and on my legs, and I did not want to go to a rehabilitation place. Just wasn't who I was. I mean, I think they're great, but I wasn't going. So I brought Carmen into my home to kind of help me. I occasionally do that if I feel like somebody just isn't going to make it. I used to. Now we're much too large, so I can't. But I brought her into my home, and she became like my super best friend. And I watched her, and I have never seen anybody with such a strong desire to serve. And I watched her carefully, and I thought, gosh, the nursing profession has lost one of the best people that they could ever have. And I felt so bad for her. So I asked her about her nursing license. Go ahead.
At that point, my nursing license had been revoked. And on black and white, I was educated with my bachelor's degree, but I had multiple drug felonies. I was a habitual offender. And I had been fired or let go because of drug diversion. So the way that it looked in black and white is no one would ever give me another opportunity to serve in medicine again. And I wouldn't blame them.
But I was praying, and I was praying with her, and I thought, we could get these licenses back. We could get these licenses back. And so I told her, and she says,
No.
it's not going to happen. Let's give up on that and let's go on. And she laughed, and I said, well, let me see. So made some calls, and we're very, very blessed to have Christ Health Center work with us. And so we called Dr. Regard, and Dr. Regard said, well, I'll give her a start. It'll be low, and it'll be just something in the office. Now, tell us a little bit about this. This is just, my heart just soars when I think about this.
Yes. So I started at Christ Health Center. They offered me the job. and I could not have been more excited. Now, it was entry level as a medical assistant, and I started there, what is now 6 years ago. I worked my way up through medical assistant to the lead medical assistant to the clinic lead to the clinical manager, and I have had to go through during this entire journey. I've been working to satisfy my court requirements and multiple
And they
counties.
were many, many, many.
Yes, it took me about 3 years just to satisfy the court requirements that were there, the probations, the finishing out of parole. And then I've spent probably another 2 years just trying to pay off the fines. And the last 3 years, almost 2.5, 3, I've been working. I started to work on my application for reinstatement to the Board of Nursing. And so I've spent the final 3 years going in and out of what they require Bradford, that you attend there, that you have multiple evaluations from psychologists, neuropsychologists, multiple meeting requirements, so on and so forth. And so finally, as of May of this year, they have reinstated my license as a nurse. And so now I am the nurse manager over at Christ Health Center.
Isn't that wonderful?
Yes.
And Christ Health has been with you the whole time.
They have. They have supported me 100%.
Now, let's talk about really the most important thing that has happened to you, and that is your walk with God.
Yes. Yes.
Because you came in.
I came in knowing of God, but not having a relationship with Him. Maybe a couple Bible studies when I was little, vacation Bible school, something like that. But I will never forget standing in, and I remember who was behind me. I don't remember who was preaching, but I remember them, just a call to the altar. And I remember at that moment, just something changed in my heart. I think it was just a willingness to surrender. And at that point, I surrendered my life. I had no idea what a walk would look like. I had no idea what it meant. But every moment since then, there was a point in time in my life where I said, in trying to hear God's voice over Carmen's voice, it was pretty much whatever Carmen said, you probably didn't need to do. And so I'd go with whatever other voice was there. And I had surrounded myself with ladies from the center still. I had surrounded myself with Christ Health Center, and they too, just have this massive walk in faith. And over time, it has just been listening and hearing, surrendering, taking the next step, the next difficult step, and praying that God would make a way, trying to hear His voice and be faithful to a call that isn't my own, but is His, which a lot of times isn't easy, but knowing how to die to myself and open up to Him and how He would have my life be, as difficult as that has been and as hard of a walk that has been at some times, I look back over the last 8 years and know beyond a shadow of a doubt that had it not been for Him guiding my path, there's no way I would be where I am today. I wouldn't.
How long did you have to live with me?
Almost 2 years. Almost 2 years.
2 years?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Oh, hard. 2 years. No,
Wasn't that bad.
Not really. But I know living with me is like 24/7 counseling.
It is.
It gets old.
It had its days.
It's hard.
It's hard.
Very hard, but that's okay. You made it, and I'm just so excited. So now, you have a husband.
I do. I'm remarried, and we have a 2.5-year-old little boy.
Uh-huh.
We have a home that we've bought. I remember you had us write a letter to ourselves, and it was early on about to talk to our future self and to write a list of all the things that we had allowed the devil to take from us. And literally every single thing that is on that piece of paper that I still have today,
Now,
God
what
had-
did I have you do? Write down everything that you
Mm-hmm.
wanted.
Yep, everything that I wanted, everything
was
that I
good.
had left.
We
had some
need,
good
I need to do
ideas.
that today. Go ahead.
And just a future letter to ourselves. What would you say to yourself in the future? And inspiring, of course. And it's not, I still have it in a little bitty white and black box that I had when I was still at your house. And everything that is on that list, even the small things like having a bank account again, having an active driver's license, owning a car, everything.
Yeah, we had to get your driver's license.
We had to get everything.
I mean, everything. You had nothing.
I came back to the center with a bag in my hand of clothes that had been cut off from the trauma center in Walker County, and their little blue scrubs. I literally came in the doors with nothing, which was a good thing. I guess looking back, I didn't have anything to hold on to except the remembrance of what that overdose was like. And I held on to that bag for almost a year just to remind myself.
Got
before I didn't want
baptized
to go
at the
back.
center.
Got baptized at the center. Yeah. And
I mean, you just have the whole walk. You've just completely been reborn. And that's what Jesus does for us. But we have to be willing to let him, and pride and all kinds of things get in the way. You had absolutely no pride.
no, not the final time.
I will say, the last thing, you were the most humble I've ever seen. I mean, it was just, I guess you had lost it all.
I had.
Now, you've got everything except for
My son, my oldest son,
your oldest son. Do you still long for him?
100%. 100%. That is something
Dad
I
never let you near him. And that daddy's girl.
is. I think I was traded in for my son, and that's still something that I have a difficulty with. It's a pain that I know that he feels or is going to feel.
Do what?
I said the pain that I have now being away from my father and him, I know is a pain that ultimately my son feels being estranged from his parents. I know he's going to have questions that I can't answer. And I place that in God's hands to the best of my ability, that when the time comes and he's old enough and able to find us, that I will hopefully be able to answer those questions.
Do you
for him.
ever talk to your dad?
On occasion, through a text here or there, mostly to see if, he'll allow me to send Brennan a Christmas or birthday present or see how he's doing overall.
Does he let you send him presents?
Yes, on occasion.
Do you talk to him?
Maybe for a minute or two, but it feels like strangers. I think he's calling just to say thank you, which is wonderful, but the relationship isn't there anymore.
Your daddy will never let you have it.
No. He doesn't forgive me.
Does your daddy know that you got your license and all back?
I haven't told him that part yet.
Well, maybe we'll send him this.
There you go. That's a good start.
I still pray for you to have a restored relationship because that was on that sheet too.
Yeah, that's the only thing.
That's the only thing that hasn't happened. But you know what? We serve such a big God. And right when we think it's hopeless,
It's all in his time.
look what he does.
I know.
He is there. Maybe not the way we want him to be, but he is there. Look at the miracles in your life,
Just massive.
And without question. And I measure you by every nurse in the hospitals when I'm there. And there has not been a nurse that is better than you. You are the most fantastic nurse, and you have such a touch. It would have been an atrocity for you not to get those licenses back. It would have been something that the medical profession would need. It needs you.
I need it.
And I'm so thankful that you have been restored.
As am I.
And we're going to pray that your son, one day he's going to say, I got to know my mom.
They will.
And as long as he knows where you are, does your dad just not come to Birmingham?
No, he has no ties to Birmingham any longer. Yeah. They're in Philadelphia now.
Do what?
They're in Philadelphia now. So it's a little bit of a drive away. If he would allow me to come, though, I would be there in an instant.
He's never allowed you to go. Well, so the daddy's girl's been switched for the daddy's girl's son.
Yes.
And we'll just have to deal with it for the time being.
We will.
I'm so glad you came.
Me too.
I love you so much, and I am so proud. That sounds like, but I am so, how about excited to know you and to see where your life is now. It is so awesome.
It is.
And I'm so glad that the center was there when you needed us.
I am too.
And I am so glad that I was there because I promise you, I got as much out of this relationship as you did.
It's hard to believe.
And I love you a great deal.
I
Thank
love
you.
Too. Thank you.
Well, that's Carmen. And I'm so glad you got to hear her story. It's just so phenomenal. And if God will do that for her, he'll do it for you too. You just have to allow him to. You have to get yourself to a place where you sit down and just listen. Be still and know that I am God is what you have to do. Thank you so much.